God.
Mission sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It's astonishing.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
Three, 2, 1, action.
Hello everyone, welcome to ProAV. Thank you very much for joining us for quite an exciting one. Today, one of the biggest launches well, in the industry for quite a while, but certainly from Canon in quite a while. The C400. It's been a busy week, but I am joined by Tom from Canon. How are you, Tom?
I'm very well, especially with the new C400 here.
Yeah, it must be quite exciting over there at Canon at the moment.
Definitely.
So yeah, thank you so much for spending the time to sit down with us and do this. I think these sessions are really valuable as a chance for customers to, in some ways, emulate that trade show experience and, you know, listen to what the brand has to say, listen to what we have to say after having used it independently, but also give a little bit back, you know, tell us what they think, ask the awkward questions. You know, it's good to have a platform for this. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to do this. I really do appreciate it.
No problem at all.
So thank you already for those of you who have left questions already. I can see quite a few coming in already. There's a decent amount of people watching. Thank you so much for those questions. I can bring them up on screen like this as we go. So I will use them to steer the conversation as we go. But if I haven't got around to yours just yet, it might be because I'm saving it for when we get onto that relevant topic. But please do just flood us with questions and I'll try and work them in wherever we can. And also these things inevitably turn into a little bit of a sort of feature request session. So if there is anything that you want to see added to the camera or you think that would be tweaks by the camera, let us know. We've got Tom here. We've got a couple of people from Canon in the comment section already. In fact, actually, I can see Barry, very timely Barry, has just chimed in there. So Barry is from Canon as well. He'll be answering some questions in the chat. So we might get some ones that he's already answered that I'll still bring up because I think they're worth talking about on camera. But thank you so much for your help, Barry, as well. But yeah, let us know what you would like to see from Canon in the future as well, because it's always useful to compile a little list from streams like these to send back to the engineers and go, this is what customers want. But this is a really, really exciting camera. I've loved my time with this camera so far and filming with it. I'm really, really quite impressed.
Yeah, and I mean, the feedback so far we've had from people just seeing the initial launch and then people like yourselves have actually gone out and shot with it has just been brilliant. So I think we're really excited to get it out there and get it in the hands of people to actually shoot with it.
Absolutely. So before we get started with the slides and stuff, you can see some of our footage from when we did go out filming with it, playing on a screen behind me. I've compiled that and taken that out of our main review video to be a couple of minutes of sample footage to start, just so that you can see a little bit of what the camera can do before we get started. So I'll play that for you. I appreciate a lot of you will probably have already seen some of either our launch video or other people's launch video. I just thought that would be a nice way to start. And a little bit of context on this. This was all filmed very, very quickly. None of this is sort of set up and formulated. This is sort of documentary run and gun style, really, filming. Some of it is lit, some of it is natural light outside, but all of it is working very, very quickly, and all of it is graded very, very quickly. I've just, for the most part on this, used a phantom LUT, really, and that is it. A few areas where I've messed up the exposure a tiny bit, I've had to sort of raise and lower the shadows and the highlights a little bit just to get it back to looking the right way, but that's kind of all I've done. I haven't messed around with colors at all. I haven't done any secondaries at all. No power windows, no nothing. This is effectively just a LUT and a mild exposure tweak, no saturation tweaks, anything like that. So it's effectively out of camera footage with a phantom LUT on it. So let's play the clip. Okay, so that was a little bit of what we managed to capture this week with the camera. So, I mean, it's safe to say we've all been really, really impressed here. The sharpness and detail out of this camera is incredible. You know, the rolling, the sort of lack of rolling shutter when it moves. I mean, it's not zero, but it's certainly well under control. The dynamic range is exceptional out of it, blew me away. It's just got such a lot going for it, this camera, in terms of the image. I've been really, really impressed.
I think the footage you just shown, I think it literally speaks for itself. I mean, it's such a great image straight out of camera. So
absolutely, and obviously that was very compressed. But if you watch our main video, and I might upload it separately as well for people to just look at the footage by itself, I think that might be useful for people. But obviously on this stream is not the best way to judge the quality of anything.
No, really.
Live streams
gives you a rough idea, but yeah,
everything
so
down.
You're probably not going to see the clarity that we're seeing on these nice monitors.
Exactly, this 4K monitor behind me looks beautiful, doesn't it?
It's very nice.
But yeah, so questions are flooding in. Barry's doing a great job of answering them. I will get through to some of them, but let's start by some of the slides. What is the C400, Tom?
Well, this is our new full frame RF mount Cinema EOS camera. So effectively, this in our actual range, if I pull this in, obviously we have the current R5C, C70, C300 and C500 2 at the top, but this camera now slots right there in the middle, so just above the C300 and that's because of this large sensor. But this is now our third camera with the RF mount in the Cinema EOS range. And what's unique with this is it's a 6K full frame BSI sensor, which is the first time we've done that in a Cinema EOS camera, and we'll get a bit more onto that later of how that improves the image and the different benefits you gain with it there. So here we have it. Obviously we've got it in front of us here, so we'll show you a little bit around it as well as we go. But this is very exciting because it is basically the next generation of our Cinema EOS cameras. People have been waiting a while for our next big move, and here it is, pretty much. So diving straight into it, who is it for? Is probably one of the first things people might be wondering. And there's a wide range. What we're finding with this camera is we're almost calling it the Swiss Army knife of the industry, really, because there's so many different pockets of customers and areas where it would actually suit really well. But kind of the three key areas are cinema, so thinking things like TV dramas, documentary, those solo operators that want one compact body but with a fantastic image in low light and high dynamic range. And then on the live production side of things, this camera's fantastic with the amount of I/O it's got on board. So brilliant for those news shooters and those filming live events, and we'll dive a bit more into that later on.
That's very relevant, actually, because that is a whole side of this camera that a lot of us at launch have neglected and talked about the cinema side of it. But I mean, there is so much functionality already packed into the body itself.
And that's the thing, it's all on the body. There's no expansion units. All of these connections are all on the body, so you don't have to worry about different units for different things. There's a lot of connections and functionality packed into one body effectively.
Absolutely.
And then finally, which again people may have not realized at the launch, but virtual production. So there's a lot of tech and metadata that this camera can provide, so it's almost kind of the perfect camera for virtual production, especially when you pair with things like our full frame like flex zoom lenses, because they have the metadata pin out as well. Combine that with the camera and you've got the perfect metadata for virtual production. This is why we're, like I say, we're calling it the Swiss Army knife, because it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly which direction it's going to go, because there's so many different areas where this camera will suit so well, pretty much.
Exciting. Very exciting.
So let's dive into the key headline specs, and then we'll deep dive into them a little bit more. So as I briefly mentioned, this is a 6K full frame BSI sensor, and that is capable of recording up to 60p 6K RAW. That's all internal inside the camera. To back that up, if you are shooting 4K in the internal codecs like the XFAVC and HEVC, then that is oversampled from 6K down to 4K, 4210-bit. So as like the footage you were showing, it just looks really crisp, effectively straight out of camera. got high frame rate recordings all the way up to 4K 120.
Do we know if that's oversampled all the way up to 120?
So the oversampling is up to 60p. Yeah. And then you have also got high frame rates even further. If you are in a Super 35 crop, you get up to 180. So a little bit further there in slow motion. And what's key with this is this BSI sensor is still capable of producing this wide dynamic range, because I know people might ask about DGO sensor.
Yep.
That's the first question people might ask. And yes, a fantastic sensor, and the C300 and C70 sensor, it's obviously brilliant dynamic range, but there's so many benefits to having this back illuminator sensor. And the great thing is you're not sacrificing dynamic range, you're still getting 16 stops, which is the key thing there. And I mean, like, looking at your footage, I keep glancing over your shoulder at the,
Sorry,
the video
really
of it playing, but it does look fantastic. Like, the dynamic range just looks brilliant straight out of camera. Now, here's one of the special things which is very exciting. This is our first camera, and I believe the only camera out there that actually offers a triple base ISO.
Which is very exciting.
Yes, indeed. So, of course, the R5C had a dual base ISO,
Yep.
but this one's now a triple, and the top of that base ISO is 12,800 as well. So you're going to have this really large latitude to play with in terms of best low light performance out of the camera.
I mean, this is just incredible. It feels like yesterday I was trying to explain to people what dual native ISO was for the first time. I went back with the Vericam light, and it was just barely anybody had sort of gone, oh, that's a really interesting technology. And now we're up to 3 base. I saw somebody in my comments was saying I'm waiting for 4 stock base ISOs.
Baby steps.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
So those 3 ISOs in log are 800, 3200,
Yeah.
12,800.
That's right. Yeah, and they do shift slightly when you're just shooting in the 709 profiles, depending on which one you're in. But if you want the highest ISO performance, all the way up 12,800, that's where you're shooting log or raw, effectively. Then we've got the latest iteration of dual pixel CMOS AF. Of course, the autofocus was brilliant in the previous iteration, C70, 300, 500. But now we've got the next generation, which is AF2, which is similar to that of what you get in the mirrorless cameras, which has obviously been fantastic for really accurate face tracking, as well as things like animal tracking and body tracking, which is what the EOS ITR AFX brings in as well. So very reliable autofocus. Recording formats, we'll deep dive into this, but you've got a lot of options here depending on the production. But like I say, the kind of the highest you can get in this is that internal raw 6K raw, or to the built-in CF Express cards. And then I was saying RF mount, obviously this was long awaited. A lot of people were saying when we're going to move the next step to the RF mount. Obviously we had the C70 and the R5C first, but I think this kind of speaks for itself because there's so many benefits to this mount, from communication to
and
adapters.
You guys make some amazing glass for it.
Exactly,
the 50mm 1.2 has long been one of my favourite lenses on the market, and then the newest lenses like this 24 to 105 f2.8. And the new 35mm that was launched, which is here on the C70,
in the middle here,
which was launched yesterday alongside the camera, are just fantastic, and they're full frame. So they kind of don't sit very well with the C70. The 35 does; it's a beautiful 50mm equivalent on the C70, but the 24 to 105, it's a full frame zoom really, and so it always made a lot of sense with the R5C. But then the R5C, I don't know, it just felt like it was crying out, particularly with the servo attachment, for a bigger camera with it.
And a more production orientated camera. So I mean, this 24-105 combination with the C400 here, I think's pretty much going to be a lot of people's go-to combination.
I think this is the default.
Yeah,
really.
I think I literally saw someone in the comments on a video somewhere yesterday say, I want to TIG weld the lens to the C400 because I don't plan on taking it off.
Gaffer tape it on.
Yeah, exactly. So very exciting what that brings there. As we talked about virtual production, metadata support is fantastic. So brilliant for the virtual production environment. And the form factor, I mean, it's always hard to tell on camera, but I remember when I first got this out the box, I was told it was small, but when I actually saw it, it is surprisingly compact, especially comparing to the 300 and 500.
I mean, it's definitely compact and much more squarer than the 300 and 500. Somebody has actually said in the comment section, can you show us the size compared to the C70? Since they are both on the table in front of you, shall we do that quickly if we just cut
slowly
the close-up camera?
do you want me to move them around?
Yeah, should we put the C70 in front of it maybe?
I mean, I can't see what's on the screen.
Like
There
that,
we go.
yeah.
So I mean, if that,
So it is definitely bigger. It's not particularly if you take off the top handle, because that's the thing with this camera. A lot of the size is it being vertically heightened by that top handle and monitor attachment, and bigger at the side by the side handle.
Yeah.
If you take those off, it's a surprisingly compact camera.
Quickly
really,
take them off.
I had a shot in the video just holding with the sensor open like that, and it looks remarkably small. I do like it with that side handle there. I would definitely, unless I was on a gimbal,
I mean,
try and keep that side handle on at all times. Really,
just
but
quickly connect
you can easily take apart that with an Allen key anyway. That viewfinder, that monitor, and take that off, and then mount that on the top of the camera in any particular way. Even with the stock Canon one mounts on there, but take the actual LCD off. You could mount it with an articulating arm, a little ball head like a small rig swivel mount could go on there quite easily enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many rigging potentials, because you effectively start with this box and then you build it up or build it down as much as you want.
Exactly.
But
I could
that gives you
absolutely
a rough
see
idea
somebody
of size.
making a cage which mounts that sort of in that top central position.
Yeah,
That would be
I
quite
think there's some
interesting to
pictures
see.
I've got later on where this is effectively mounted where it's just the screen and it basically just sits just above the camera there, and it looks
Fantastic.
really nice and compact, and people have literally put it on a gimbal like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right, while we'll stop, shall I go through some of the... Barry's been doing a fantastic... He's been really busy in the... busy Barry in the comment section. So lots of feature requests, things like open gate recording. This is a big one people are wanting. It has a 16:9 sensor, doesn't it? This isn't a 3:2 sensor.
Well, 17:9.
It's 17:9 sensor.
Yeah.
Sorry,
that's right.
Fine. So that we wouldn't be able to get open gate recording on this camera. The camera I really want to see open gate recording on actually is the R5C, because of course that has the 3:2 sensor of the R5 for stills, and so I'd love to see open gate recording on that. But yes, it would be nice to have something more anamorphic-y orientated, 4:3 or 1:1 or something as a crop in. And that. Let's just jump through some of the early questions. What version of HDMI is it? Can you output RAW over the HDMI? We're not certain on this.
I have to check. I have a feeling if it's similar to the C70 and C300, it will be 4K 42 10-bit over HDMI.
Yeah, and not RAW, so just intended to be monitoring.
So it's all about Canon's internal Cinema RAW Lite, which is the codec that you get built into this camera.
And works in pretty much every major editing platform and plays back really smoothly.
Yeah, and if you can do it all on camera, don't have to worry about extra bits and recorders and drives, then it saves you time, effectively.
George is saying, what made Canon go with a more box-type build? Do you know any of the mentality behind going and squaring the camera off like that?
I think it's more just to make it a more compact form factor. Obviously, the C300 and C500 was more to build it up for a larger production and having larger connections, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, the whole idea with this camera is you can make it, like we said, as big or as small as you need it to be. So if you can shrink it down, but as we said, the amount of I/O that's on this, it's all crammed in there somehow, then why not? Because then that way you've got the option and flexibility to go both ways pretty much. Absolutely. He also says, I noticed a mount point on the back. Is that for V-mounts? So there's this sort of blank plate on the back with 4 screws on it. There, which is a huge amount of real estate on the back of what is quite a packed-in camera. And so obviously that was designed on the C300, C500 to allow you to attach those external accessories onto the back, the expansion units. But the connector for those has gone Yeah, because like I said, you don't need the expansion units with these, but we realised that a lot of people made third-party accessories even for 300 and 500. So having that on there means there's so many options. I've seen already some fantastic mini V-mount plates that literally sit flush on the back here, really compact. They connect into the 4-pin XLR, and then you can have like a little micro V-mount on the back, and then it's still such a compact, nice little rig.
And it will sit above your BPU battery, so you can hot swap.
So you can hot swap, which is brilliant. Yeah,
clever,
definitely.
But there isn't any sort of official word from Canon as to what that's there for.
Not
that
currently,
is
no.
sort of just for those accessories.
It's primarily designed for third-party devices.
Okay. The other one that I saw that I really want to add to the feature requests is any options to do 6K in non-RAW formats in the future. Some sort of 6K in the MP4 formats, that kind of thing, I think would be definitely worth sticking on that feature request list, because in the moment, the only way to, am I right in thinking that the only way to get 6K is with RAW?
Yeah. So the RAW is 6K. Any other formats, they can do up to 4K 120 effectively. But it is something we can feedback, definitely.
Awesome. Andreas is saying, can I use the base plates on the C400 that fit on the C300? I don't think so, can you? Because it's got different screw threads on the bottom.
I think the IBIS are slightly different. It's similar layout, but I've not compared them exactly side by side, but looking at pictures between the two, I think it is a different layout.
Yeah, there will be universal ones with sliding. You know, if you've got a universal base plate from one of the rig manufacturers.
Like I say, some mounts and things like the V-mount plates, etc., that they fit just as they would on the 300 and 500. So there is a few bits out there that still fit on there.
Awesome. And then the big picture questions about other cameras in the lineup, which I appreciate you. If you did know, you won't be able to tell us anything about them. But Alex is saying, will there be a C70 successor with a smaller size than this? And Magenta Film Docs is saying, what does the 400 mean for the future of the 300 and 500 line? Basically, where does it sit in the upcoming hierarchy of future releases? So it's a really interesting point. It's sort of it's shaken up. It's given the old lineup a bit of a kick, hasn't it?
I know people are very excited about this, and definitely I've had already DPs messaging me saying, well, where does this sit with my 300 and 500? And currently the 300 and 500 are still there to stay. Like we're not getting rid of them. They're still in the lineup, and there's definitely still a place for each of them. Obviously, the 300 Mark III has the fantastic DGO sensor, so the expanded dynamic range, and then the C500 II is still a fantastic camera with the modular expansion and having things like the larger XLRs, and I think there's also some audio. I think it's AES. I always forget the name of it, but the audio. What's it called?
Codec.
Yeah.
Sure. As I guess the independent voice, this is because this doesn't belong in the same generation as the 300 and 500. Really, this is part of the next generation, and whether or not we'll see something higher end or lower end than this, whether this is the new flagship and then something will slot in underneath it, whether or not this is the mid range and something will slot in above it, we will have to just wait and see, won't we? But I mean, this definitely feels like the next generation on from the C100 and 500.
There's a lot of exciting tech that's been crammed into this, and it is in certain situations a lovely step up, definitely.
Absolutely. I already have an RF to EF adapter from Canon. Will this work? It should. I'd see absolutely no reason. In fact, I've tried the RF to EF adapters.
No problem at all.
Perfectly fine. A few techie questions which Barry has already answered. Somebody talking about, is internal 6K RAW cleaner than the internal 8K RAW in the R5? I'm asking because I have to use it for green screen work. If you're talking about noise levels, I would say the R5 might be cleaner. This one, the RAW in this has no noise reduction whatsoever, and so if you just want noise performance and detailed 8K, the 8K MP4 out of the R5 and R5C is fantastic for that. If you need the extra color information for the green screen of the RAW, I think my gut would say 8K RAW on the R5.
Yeah, I think just because it's a slightly higher resolution sensor,
Exactly.
I'm thinking the more detail and data you can get there, the better.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be close.
Absolutely. Cool. And then a bunch of people, Andrew is saying this camera's a no-brainer for me to replace my old Sony FS5. Nice work, Canon. Lots of people saying some very positive things. I think this camera's going down really well. Okay, the chat is getting completely away from me. So let's go on with some more slides.
And I'll
try and figure out what you guys want to ask next.
So, of course, like I was saying, was talking about size, and like I say, it's really compact. It's a lot crammed into one body, and the amount of connectivity. I've got a full slide on everything on the back, but there's a lot of connections on here.
Well, let's talk about these ones that I haven't really talked about in the video. So Wi-Fi, Ethernet, Genlock, and this lens port. These sort of boring but very important.
Definitely. And I think that's where it sits into the live production area, having things like the return, the Genlock, syncing up your cameras, and on the front here. I mean, it's going to be hard to show, but on the very front of the body, or you'll see on the image there, there is the lens pin, which effectively is designed to power larger servo lenses. So things like the new RF CN7 we've just launched, the same yesterday, or any of the other Cine servos. Effectively, you can actually drive those lenses, and it's all on body. And the key thing there, nice upgrade from the C400 and C500, is that lens pin is on the front, so it's right near where the drive unit is. Previously, it was on the back.
And you had to have the largest expansion unit as well, I believe, isn't it? The middle and the smaller ones didn't have
that. That's right, to have the lens drive. So, that's all on the front, so it's nice and compact, and it's designed around the operator, effectively.
And this will be partly why this is more suitable for those sort of live production, E&G.
Definitely,
And,
and it's the small details. So, like simple things like the audio dials are now on the left hand side. So now basically all of your operation settings are all on one side, and then all your connections are on the other. So you don't have to look around the other side to change your audio settings. If you're using it as a shoulder rig, the settings are there right by your eyes. So it's just the small things that have really ticked all the boxes for a lot of people with this.
Awesome. And the Genlock and the timecoder, the smaller little DIN.
So it's a DIN
connection.
The great thing is that it's really accessible to buy the adapter cables, so you can easily buy one of them, and then it just becomes a regular BNC connection. If you're wondering why they're that size, it's obviously just to be able to fit it on here. If we made everything full-size connections, there's no way this camera would be this size, or it just wouldn't have them at all. So they had to be somewhere they could shrink it down to fit it all on the body. That's how they've achieved that, basically.
That makes sense.
Brilliant. Okay, and here's just a very quick example of side by side with the C500, just to give you an idea of size. It is lighter as well, so it is just a nice welcome shrink down in size, which just makes it easier for things like gimbals and
I mean, if you look at those bottom dimensions there, that's a good sort of 3 centimeters less sort of deep.
Exactly.
Camera, which sounds like a small number, but it really does make a difference.
Well, you have to. What's kind of crazy to think really is previously the C500, for example, had an EF mount, so there was a lot of extra body space there to allow for the flange distance. Whereas you have to remember with this camera, it's RF, so the sensor is literally behind that mount by only a few mil. So they've crammed a lot of buttons and tech into such a small body, effectively. So very impressive what they've been able to achieve.
Very cool.
So moving on, we've got a range of new accessories, and this is all what comes in the box as well. So we've got this new monitor bracket. So this is now with this very crazy animation.
I'm just laughing at it windmilling in the corner.
Doing a little dance. Someone got excited with stop motion or something there. But effectively, there's so many configurations that you can have now, because it has this NATO rail here, which you can slide in and out, as well as, a rail and then a NATO rail here. So you've got all this different flexibility with the screen, and of course you can still bring it over the top there for the more compact view. Or like I was saying, if you take off the handle, you can just mount this straight to the body itself. There's lots of mounting points as well, so you can basically make it as you like it, effectively, depending on your shoot and what sort of rig you prefer, effectively. You've also got this new top handle, and what's great with this is it now has a smart hot shoe, effectively.
Yes.
The multi camera hot shoe. So effectively with this, there's pins down on the body, and it passes it through to the top of the handle. So if you are using the handle, you don't have to worry about removing that feature. So that gives you things like the what's it called? The new Canon mounts that you can, microphone that you can put on top there, and you don't need any cables because it communicates through the smart hot shoe effectively.
It'd be great for scratch audio on something like this.
Exactly, you don't have to worry about additional cables. There is also an extension of that as well. So if for any reason you don't want the hot shoe there and you need it off to the side somewhere, if you do connect it directly to the body, you can get this extension cable, which you can put the connection wherever you like there.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because somebody said, well, Canon take FX6 trade-ins. I think there'll be a lot of FX6s for sale.
That's up to ProAV.
And the other thing that, of course, you can put on that multi-interface shoe is the Tascam XLR recorder, which I've actually got
of course.
down there in front of you on the R5C.
Yes, so on the body we have two mini XLR connections as well as 3.5mm jack as well. But if you do want four audio connections, of course you can add the Tascam unit on top there, and then that way you've got four actual XLR connections, which is brilliant. The big thing that a lot of people overlook with cameras is obviously the audio side, which is very important, as we know. And the great thing that's always been brilliant with Cinema EOS is you've always been able to record up to 4 channels of audio. So even if you're not using the Tascam unit and you've still got your 2 mini XLRs on body, you can still record a third and fourth input. So even if you just set them at a slightly different gain level in case someone speaks up, you can then set them as like a contingency, or just for scratch audio, depending on how you want to work.
Sure.
So brilliant how that's been set up. And then finally we've got a new handle, so I'll try and turn it around there. Effectively you've now got additional customizable buttons, so even though the body shrunk down, you've not necessarily lost any functionality in terms of customizable buttons, and I think if anything it's improved by having them on the handle.
I was just thinking the same thing. I think it's improved too. Having them right there at your fingertips is brilliant. I stuck mine while filming with it for turning autofocus on and off, so autofocus lock, for false colour, which I think you guys do not get enough credit for having false colour in all of your lineup. Having false colour at the push of a button right there on your thumb.
Yeah, I mean, it's my perfect way to expose. Like, it's so useful.
I honestly find it hard to operate a camera that doesn't have it now. Like, it's just so much better. And I know we've all been sort of trained on waveforms and to use waveforms. After using false colour for a while now, I find it really hard to go back and expose
it's
a
just
waveform.
so easy, especially when you're outside in the sun and you might be struggling to see your screen, even with larger monitors, and just be able to flick that on. As long as you can make out a hint of say green, you know, your middle grey somewhere there.
Exactly. For all of this, I was filming in the dark on the inside. I was filming in sort of half inside, half outside situations. I was outside in fields in direct sunlight. I was amongst bushes in sort of that sort of path way with trees above me and everything like that, with a very contrasty scene. Not once did I really worry about my exposure. I had so much exposure confidence the entire way, and that's just because the camera had false colour, and because the false colour was right there at my thumb. I found I used it a lot more than I do on the other cameras. On the C7 I always map. That's also got a button in a similar place, and I map it to that.
Yeah, no, it's very useful. And I think one other thing as well that's been added with these now is both the monitor and also the grip now use a USB-C cable. So just one more way of streamlining things for you. If you do want to adapt the rig, you've actually got ways now to be able to extend things easily with a supported cable. So things like the grip, I know people love to have them on a shoulder rig and have it further away from the camera body. So you just get an extension USB-C, and just like that you've got a different style rig.
And it connects with an ARRI rosette, does it?
Yes, so you just screw it here, it locks into where it is, and you can easily loosen it off and then readjust the angle depending on your shooting style.
Very cool.
Brilliant. Okay, so moving on to kind of how you rig it, shooting styles. We talked about this a little bit. Here's a few image examples, so you can see how small you can get it when you want to put it on a gimbal, which I think is one of the most impressive things. And taking advantage of that extended USB-C there, you can see this person has actually mounted the LCD monitor that you get in the box down to the handle of their gimbal there, so you don't have to worry about a third-party monitor to be able to control your camera. And of course you get the benefits then of having the touchscreen for autofocus. It's just these little small things that really add up. And then on the other end of things, of course, you've got your larger rigs. It still works brilliantly when combining with some of our cine lenses, whether that's the flex zooms or our cine servos. It's designed for so many different use cases. And here's just a few physical examples, whether it could be handheld. If you have the budget for a drone, you could put it on a drone.
That's a very good point, actually, for the square top with the multiple mounting points on the top will be brilliant for drone people. When they sort of custom make that sort of cage that goes around it for it to go on the bottom of a drone or a helicopter. Being able to secure it top and bottom nicely.
Exactly,
like that.
So it's linking back to when someone asked about having it as a box shape. There's so many benefits to that in terms of rigging it, and whether it's a larger rig or even just building different homemade rigs. There's so many options you can do with this.
Definitely.
Brilliant. So moving on to the performance, the sensor, the technology within this, probably the most exciting part about it. So, as we said, this now has a 6K full frame BSI sensor, which is the first for Cinema EOS cameras, and that is capable of up to 6K recording, but you have also got Super 35 and Super 16 crop modes, so you can still take advantage of your Super 35 lenses if you're coming from, say, the C400 Mark III. But there's so many benefits to this BSI sensor. This is one of the biggest reasons why Canon chose to go this direction. So for a start, like I was saying, dynamic range is fantastic. It speaks for itself in like the example you shot. That triple base ISO means low light performance is just fantastic for this camera.
Let's just expand on that a little bit, because your good friends over at Sony have had a sensor on the market for a long time now. This 12 megapixel 4K sensor that is in the FX6, the A7S Mark III, the FX3 was launched on the A7S Mark III as the new A7S sensor. So it was designed around having big pixels, really good in low light, crank the ISO up ridiculously high and get relatively usable footage by doing so. Got a lot of attention for that. Up until this camera, that has still been the only sensor on the market in a professional video camera that has had a high ISO of 12,800. And so obviously the comparison needs to be made, so we put them side by side. And it's remarkable, really, considering this is a much higher resolution camera.
I think that's what you have to remember. That's what makes it more impressive.
I thought they were even. The amount of people that came in and saw them blind next to one another and said that one's better and pointed at the Canon was remarkable. So it can certainly hold its own against the FX6. The only difficulty, though, is I don't believe it can go up to quite as high. Do you know the ISO range on the camera? I don't think it goes quite as high.
No, I don't think I have it to hand. I might have it in the specs for at the very end. I'll double check that.
Sure. I don't think Canon have let it sort of add as much gain as Sony let their sensor add. Right. I don't think it can go up to like 200 to 400,000 or whatever.
Although I will question how many people are taking advantage of that. I guess there's some niche out
whether
there,
they should, but there's certainly some niche. So natural history, definitely. The shooting. There was an amazing sequence in, what was it? One of the Planet Earths or something like that, was it? Where it was it coyotes or something on the streets at night, all shots on the streets at night in LA or something like that, of them sort of basically ravaging wild animals going through the bins and stuff like that in downtown America. And it was amazing footage. But that sort of real world situation quite often do want to go up that crazy high. The normal, the rest of us, probably not.
I think the great thing with this though is that middle ISO. So of course a lot of cameras that might have dual base ISO, they have something at the very low end, something at the very high end, or they don't have anything in the middle. So then you find you've kind of got this gap when you don't quite want to go up to 12,800, but you kind of feel forced to, or vice versa.
Yes.
And then you obviously don't get as good performance. So having that triple base ISO
Absolutely.
really makes a difference in just giving you the full flexibility no matter the conditions.
Absolutely. I think that's really the benefit of this, because it was sort of this awkward choice between that Sony sensor, which could go up to 12,800 ISO, but sort of struggled at the sort of 6,400. And most of the comparisons I ever did comparing it at 6,400, it lost them. But then as soon as you went up to sort of 8,000 and 10,000, it won them because it was using the higher ISO. This is going to combat that by having that 3,200 one in the middle, because that is a really realistic, anyone that shoots documentary stuff, just the average out on the streets at night time, the end of a wedding as things are getting a bit darker on the dance floor, the exterior shot of an office in the night time, that kind of shot, 6,400 is probably the ISO you normally end up on rather than 12,800. So having that middle ISO is going to be really beneficial to people. Really beneficial.
Definitely. And then, as you mentioned earlier, the other major benefit with a BSI sensor is because of how quickly it's reading the sensor. The rolling shutter is a huge step up from a regular CMOS sensor. So, I think did you do some tests
also,
of that? But
I didn't do. I just did my normal. I didn't feel it was really. Well, one, we don't really have the capability of getting an actual number, but I also don't really think it's that fair on a pre-production
there is
unit.
that as well.
But we did do our normal sort of bookcase wild
and if
panning,
it
which is
passes
so
that and
unrealistic.
does the job, then
exactly. Who's actually going to use it like that?
Yeah.
And it was fine. There was very little skew on there, really. It's certainly faster than the previous cameras, and I think that is also a really important part to play in the DGO conversation, where DGO inherently does add processing time to the sensor, and so the C70 has more rolling shutter because it has a DGO sensor in it than if it didn't have a DGO sensor in it. Now, because of the smaller Super 35 sensor, where that's got to is probably an acceptable amount for most people, hence why we never really hear anyone has any problems with rolling shutter. If you enlarge that DGO sensor to full frame, I imagine you would have been seeing that increase, because you got to full frame, you start to have to process more. You add DGO into the mix, you start to have to process more. That would have been ramping up the rolling shutter performance, I imagine.
Yeah, possibly. I guess the key thing here with the BSI sensor is just if you can get the high dynamic range, which was the key reason to go for a DGO sensor, but whilst gaining all these other benefits, then it's kind of a no-brainer of why Canon have gone with the new sensor.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So moving on, I did have one on the...
Barry's also been chatting about that down there. He's just said, I'm sure if a full-frame DGO is able to be done without losing any other features, it will be done. There is no DGO over Super 35 size at this time. Let's see what the future holds. Thank you, Barry. Very diplomatic. And
that was just a quick example of the triple base ISO. And as I mentioned, the base ISO just changes slightly depending on if you're in the wide DR profiles and not shooting in log.
So somebody's just asked, does the triple base ISO change if shooting in a Rec 709 profile such as the Canon 709? Typically, the Rec 709 profiles have a base ISO of 400. It absolutely does.
So there we go. Yeah. So it's if you're shooting 709, YDR, or PQ and HLG HDR modes, then the base ISOs become 400, 1600, and 6400.
Yep. And I would strongly argue nobody really should be using that BT 709 at the bottom. The new Canon 709 and certainly YDR is definitely better in my opinion. But perhaps that happens to be people's workflows out there. But
exactly. Now, moving on to lens technology, RF mount obviously was a huge move for us, and I think it was one that was obviously needed, just because there's so much more technology you can now achieve with these lenses, from the optical elements to them. The autofocus performance is a huge step up. and even things like the advanced lens metadata. So in real time, the camera's talking back and forth with the camera, and that's where you get things like the combined IS. So the in-body digital IS is actually working with any optical lens IS, so they're actually working in tandem. And then what's not to forget with this is we're not ruling out EF and PL. There's no reason at all why you can't use our adapters, which is what I've got here. And that's why we've launched this new PL to RF adapter. So now we've actually got a native adapter. The benefits with this one is it actually locks to the body. So if you've ever used the 0.71 times like speed booster for the C70, you can actually bolt it to the body in a very similar way. So you've got a very secure PL mount. It opens up so many lens options, as well as using the regular EF to RF adapters as well.
I think this is a really important part of the conversation about this camera. I think it would be very easy to gloss over this and just sort of think, oh, this is an RF cinema camera. It's just an RF cinema camera.
Yeah.
In some ways, I almost wish this was included with the camera, because it with this added and with those wings on it, it's going to be like it was a PL mount native camera. And we see this again from some other manufacturers like the Sony Burano and the Venice, which have their multiple mounts options. You're going to be able to treat this. If you want a PL mount camera, and this is the camera that you want, you're going to be able to just slap this on and pretend it is a PL mount camera effectively.
And then when the other job comes up for you, where you need autofocus and you need a run and gun lens, you just take the adapter off, you go back to your RF lens, and you've almost got two cameras in one. So there's so many benefits to having this. I think people get a bit scared of adapters, when there's actually really lots of benefits to it being an RF with the options for these. Yep. Okay. Now moving on to the autofocus, this is just to give you an idea of how that's improved over the previous generations.
Yes.
So this has now moved to the full sensor. So previously on like the C70, C300 and 500, you was covering around 80% of the sensor, whereas now it's basically virtually 100% of the sensor now, so you don't have to worry about a subject going slightly out of frame there. And you've got the addition now of as well as body tracking, having things like the animal detection. So currently this is for dogs and cats. I'm sure that'll be very very welcome for certain people. But the autofocus is a really nice step up, a lovely improvement, just to make it even smoother and more accurate tracking your subjects. There is also a difference in the AF speed now. It's been changed slightly.
I noticed this caught me out while filming. I went to go slow it down and went, oh, what's this?
Yeah. So previously it starts at like 0 and you either go plus so many or minus so many, whereas now it's just goes from 1 to 10. And whichever number you choose obviously affects how fast the speed is. If you're not familiar with the speed settings on a camera's, effectively you've got the option to adjust it, because what some people find is the autofocus is almost too good, so that's where you actually sometimes want to bring it down, and that's when you get them really nice pull focusers, which give you some really nice kind of cinematic shots. Obviously the vice versa of it, if you're tracking animals and things that are moving all over the place, you want the camera to be really responsive, and that's when you can up that speed and up the response settings as well. One thing not to forget, still from our current Cinema EOS cameras, but face only, I always shout about it. It's probably my favourite autofocus feature. Is just brilliant. So the fact that you put it on that setting, and if the face goes from the frame at all, it will just stop focusing and it'll wait until the face returns. So for solo operators that are shooting interviews or anything with a talking subject, etc., you don't have to worry about the camera jumping to anything else around them if for any reason the camera happens to lose the subject in your middle of your screen.
Excellent.
So moving on to recording formats and frame rates. I said there's a lot of options within this camera. So first off, if we start on the media, so this camera, I'll try and show you on the side here, actually has one CF Express Type B slot and then one SD card slot, which is for V90 SD cards. And there's a lot of options of dual recording. You can record RAW to one card and then a regular XFAVC to the other card. You're not limited to what you can record to the second card. So there's a lot of options that you can choose here, or recording like a lower res proxy if you'd like as well.
So am I right in thinking that you can do simultaneous sort of backup recording of the same quality, as long as you don't go up to the really high ones like
Yes,
RAW.
I was going to say, as long as you're not shooting RAW, then yes, you can record dual record. It's just the higher rates. Of course, they have the higher data rates, the write speeds, and of course, SD card has its limitations. That's why the CF Express is there for the higher end, like Cinema RAW codecs.
Nice.
So moving on to what's actually within the camera. So we've got a scalable 12-bit Cinema RAW Lite. So I know we've added some of these to the C400 and 500 via firmware, but you do get LT, ST and HQ versions of Cinema RAW Lite, depending on what flavour you prefer and what size compression you'd like. And that's the key thing here, the fact that you're getting internal RAW, there's no external expansion units or anything like that, it's all internal to the cards. And a lot of people love this RAW because size-wise, it's not much bigger than a lot of the regular XF-AVC.
Oh,
obviously,
sure.
it's 6K, but it's a nice happy medium being 6K as well.
SST, which is the one that I used for the most part, is about 870 or something like that, which is not crazy. And the LT, I think, by memory, was 570, which is only slightly more than regular XF-AVC.
Yeah,
HQ is high.
Yeah,
HQ is big.
Always very high, but it depends on the production. Obviously, if you need that highest quality, then
Exactly.
you
want it there.
you obviously go for that.
And it's not as high as some others. Like 6K ProRes RAW is twice the size of the 6K Cinema Canon RAW Lite.
Yeah,
So it's definitely not as high as others.
definitely. And then, of course, not everyone perhaps wants to use the RAW, and that's why you then use the really reliable XF AVC, which is our MXF wrapper. 4210-bit, this has kind of been the standard in our cameras for years now. But what's quite exciting is we've now brought out 2 additional new codecs, effectively. So effectively we've got XF AVC-S and then XF HEVC-S. So effectively the key thing with these is they use the same folder structure and file naming conventions and advanced metadata as regular XF-AVC, which is actually really important for a lot of productions, especially like TV shoots and anywhere where they have to have this structured folder structure, so that especially when they've got lots of cameras coming back in and all the dailies coming back in, it's really important to be able to have that different file naming structure. So I think I've got an example here. So being able to label whether it's ACAM, what reel it is, any custom words in there. And the key thing is, if you are recording 2 different formats to each card, maybe you're recording RAW to one, and then one of these new codecs to the other card, it'll still have the exact same naming structure and folder structure. So you can easily navigate the files and find the equivalent in a different codec there. So it's one of those that's actually really important that sometimes people overlook. And I know even myself as like a solo filmmaker, when I'm doing a lot of corporate projects and things, the MP4 has always had that limitation of when you got to clip 909, it got back to clip 1. And when you're doing larger projects over the year where you're going to be combining footage from different shoots, it starts to get quite messy and you get warnings in your software that that you've got duplicates even though you haven't. Whereas with this sort of format, just like XF-AVC, this is actually really useful for those larger shoots while still having the benefits of being MP4 and obviously smaller in size. That's the key thing there.
And you get things like the date and time in the file name, which is so useful.
Yeah, that's really
you've got to learn how to read it, because it is when you first use it, it's just this mad string. The first time I put some into the editing suite, I was like, oh god, where's just my number for like, is this clip number 1, 2, 3 or 4? Where is it? But once I found that, it's there, that sort of green bit in the middle, C001.
And also don't forget, obviously that's what it looks like in the folder, but the second you drop it into your editing software, I mean Premiere for example that I use, it has a really nice layout of all the different metadata, so you can easily filter the tabs by what bit you're trying to look for. So
absolutely,
you can really easily pick it out. So very exciting. One thing quickly just to cover is obviously frame rates. So you're looking at 6K up to 60 frames per second. As I said, the 6K is for the RAW only because it is straight off the sensor. No noise reduction or anything applied to that because, of course, it's RAW. You want it in the highest quality and then you apply anything afterwards. And then you've got 4K up to 120 and then everything below that in the regular codecs there.
We're having a few people ask, presumably because of the GH7s. Alexa, stop. Apologies. we might need to get in the habit of unplugging that when we have a live stream.
Luckily, you didn't say Alexa, do something else, because otherwise everyone's
don't say
at home will do that. I said it quietly.
Right, presumably because of the GH7 launch last night, we're having a few people asking about 32-bit float audio internally. I've seen a couple of these go past. It's important. I think that the GH7 was the first camera that we saw with this 32-bit float audio. It's going to really, for some styles of production, is really going to make a big difference to the audio capabilities in a camera. And it might well be something we see come over to other cameras over time. People asking if this can be added. As far as I know, it is a hardware chip is needed inside a camera or inside any device in order to record 32-bit float. I might be wrong. I'm not an engineer.
Yeah, I'm less familiar. I know it's not 32 float bit, but there was an upgrade in the audio from, let's say, the C400 and 500, and it went from 16-bit up to 24-bit. So there was
which is very useful.
A welcome improvement there. And the audio sounds great out of it. I know there's obviously some benefits of 32 float, but for most people, up to 24-bit, it's more than enough. And especially the fact you can have 4 channels. As I said, having those redundancies as I'd shoot them, I'd have 1 and 2 as the regular manual level, and you can always set the 3 and 4 to auto, for example, and they'd be like your recovery channels. So there's lots of ways to set it up.
Absolutely. But yeah, anyone out there holding out for it to be added over a firmware update to any camera, not just this one, it's a thing for every single camera on the market at all levels. I wouldn't hold your breath. I believe it's a hardware chip.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. That's what we have next. So, connectivity. As I said, this camera has a lot. The fact that this is all crammed into one body is rather impressive. So, here's a layout, and I'll also physically show you, but this is everything you have on the body. So, we can kind of start at the top and work our way down. We have a monitor out, as well as a 12G SDI out, so supporting up to 4K. You've also got a headphone out, as well as mic in. As I said, you've got 2 mini XLRs. For anyone that's worried about that, don't worry, it's really easy to get adapters and cables that go mini to full XLR, so it's not an issue at all. And the key thing is it's kept the body small. So if you're wondering why that is, otherwise, again, it'd be as big as the C400. So that's one way to keep it smaller in size. And then simple things like having the HDMI on here, and you have got these DIN connections. We've got Alexa listening again. But yeah, effectively we've got the 2 DIN connections here, which are for timecode and genlock or return sync. One little thing we pointed out, a small detail, but the covers now can actually be twisted out of the way, and there's a little lock on the side, a little screw, so you can actually hold them out of the way permanently, so they don't have to kind of dangle around there. And then also on the side, you've got a lot here, as well as the switching your input from what type of mic it is, whether you need 48 volt phantom power. You've also got a full-size Ethernet port on the side there, as well as built-in Wi-Fi, so no dongles or anything needed. And I've got a few slides in a moment on what sort of connections you can apply for the Wi-Fi, what sort of things you can connect to it. And as I said, everything's USB-C. So USB-C for the monitor up here, USB for the grip down here. So there's a lot on this single body. I think that's all of them on there. And then this was just briefly what we talked about. These are the optional accessories you could connect to it. So you've got that Tascam unit for a 3rd and 4th XLR connection. You've got one of our directional stereo microphones, which connects through the hot shoe as well, so you don't need any cables. It's all powered and communicated through the hot shoe. And then you've got that off-camera extension cord, effectively, to be able to position your mic or accessories wherever you like. So,
just had a interesting question.
Sure.
Barrick Media says the R5C and C70 were really difficult to match up in post. How will the C400 and C70 match? Would you say that the R5C and C70 were difficult to match up?
I wouldn't have said that.
I do
I'd
that
say
all the
they're actually
time.
a really nice combination. I mean, the R5C is a little sharper because it's an 8K sensor being oversampled. But image-wise, I think they match very well. Because
Especially if you use something like YDR.
Yeah.
I guess
yeah.
the log formats are different. Canon log 2 versus Canon log 3.
Yeah, but then if I'm going to be matching them, then I'd probably shoot log 3 on both because
True.
then you're shooting the same
Yeah.
curve just to keep it simple. And then just things like I was talking about earlier, we're just having like a grey card and custom white balance the cameras before you shoot with them. Like things like that can actually really help easily match them up as well.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that. But I mean, the C400 and C70 and R5C should match pretty well. They are all three very different sensors, and particularly the C70 and the C400 have all the same formats in YTR, log 2, log 3. They're going to match brilliantly.
And the key thing that we at Canon have always done very, very well is even as we've brought out different iterations of cameras, the colours have always stayed pretty consistent across the range. I know obviously if you look back at a camera 10 years ago, maybe it'll be slightly different, but generally speaking in the current lineup, if you put cameras side by side, the colours are very, very close. That's why our multicam solutions are very popular, because people can mix in a camcorder, a PTZ, a cinema camera, and they all work really nicely together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is
Yeah, I'm
why
surprised by that comment.
Yeah. Which is why, so for example, for multicam, as we talked about, as well as those colours matching really well between cameras, we've got some professional multi-camera functionality built in. So just simple things like having tally lamps that can be connected through a protocol that you can have trigger when your camera's cut to, as well as a simple frame on the screen so you know you're live. And you can actually have a return picture. So previously on C300 500 you had to have the expansion unit to get the return, but because this has that return DIMM port on the camera, you can actually have a feed past your camera and you can actually see what's going out live.
Yes, I remember that now from the presentations that I've set through previously, but I'd forgotten about it, to be quite honest, and that's a big deal. That's a
It
really
is,
big deal.
yeah.
You know, that's
Yeah.
not just a Genlock port, it as a return port. You know, that is something that a lot of cameras can't do. That's quite unique.
And you can easily just map it to a button, you hold it and it'll show you what shot's live, and then you let go and it'll go back to your shot. So very, very good for the operator to be able to see in real time what's going out effectively. As we said, we've got 12-pin lens terminal, and for these sort of live productions on the higher end especially, I can guarantee that they'll be using some sort of cine servo lens, so they'll need that lens power, and you don't have to worry about external devices and V-mount batteries having cables running out of them to power your lens. And then XC protocol is obviously very exciting because this is what allows you to control these cameras over IP, so whether that's through Ethernet or through Wi-Fi. So you can actually remotely control their settings through our controllers or applications and that sort of thing.
Very smart.
Brilliant. So moving on to remote connectivity, which follows in nicely from what we was talking about. So there's quite a lot of options in terms of controlling this, and especially because you've got that built-in Ethernet and Wi-Fi especially, you've got so many ways to take control. So I've just mentioned about having one of our controllers, so whether that's like the IP1000 controller, which is our fantastic PTZ controller. You could easily, in real time, adjust your colours and white balance and exposure for a live production. Or using our new multi-camera control app, which I know we briefly mentioned on our last stream. That app is fantastic. We were showing it off at MPTS if anyone happened to attend and see it there. But the idea is you can have this app on your iOS device, and you can control and monitor up to 4 Cinema EOS or I think XF605 camcorders, all from one app. So you can actually have a 4-grid view of the camera feeds, which is great for showing like a director and just for your own monitoring, as well as things like tap to focus, and an important one, trigger recording. So if you've got a 3 or 4 camera setup and you don't have to walk around and hit record on all of them, then that can really help you out there just by hitting the button on the app and they all start recording.
Interesting question from Sam. It says, can you utilise the servo when powering over the XLR power input, or does this still require the new batteries? Presumably the 12-pin port on the front would work over the mains power in, which does mean that with V-Log batteries on the third-party accessories on the back, which power it over that 12-pin port, presumably would power everything as if the new batteries were connected.
Yeah, that's right. As long as the batteries have the correct power draw, then there's no reason why you couldn't power it through the V-mount. And that's a good point on batteries. It is a slightly newer variant of batteries. Yep. So at the minute I've just got a regular BPA 30 in, but we've now got, this one comes in the box, the BPA 60N. Mm-hmm, there's also a BPA 30N. So slightly higher capacity, and you do need these to get the added functionality, such as powering the lens through the 12 pin lens mount communication port, and also things like the multi function hot shoe. Now, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but a point of confusion that I've seen in various videos since launch is the multi-interface shoe with the new battery. With the old batteries, you wouldn't lose all access to the multifunction shoe. It would just be power. So if you're plugging something in that doesn't need power. Yeah, I believe that's right. Yeah, I think I suppose most things would need power. You do need power for most things. So that's the idea. You shouldn't need to connect. Yeah, so I guess it effectively does. Yeah. So ideally, if you are going to be using that, or you need to drive power to your lens, then you need to be looking at using the Tascam unit without phantom power, for example, is where my head was going. But the whole Tascam unit wouldn't power up. So you would need power. Yeah. Nor me. I'm being silly. And the RF lenses benefit from that extra power, because if you start using things like the power zoom adapter for the RF 24105, that needs the additional power, and that's just passed through the new RF mount. So it's just a little bit more power required to power all these different accessories going on at the same time. But okay, that's just worth mentioning. So moving on to virtual production. So as well as having things like the XC protocol, which we talked about, which is brilliant for controlling the cameras in a multi-cam environment, we've also got this new protocol called the Canon Virtual protocol. And this is designed all around lens metadata and distortion correction for virtual production. So a lot of the RF lenses now can have lens correction done in camera, which is fantastic. So as you're shooting, you're actually getting a corrected image. However, you need that metadata when you're doing virtual production. So having this technology that can actually be fed over the Ethernet port to a piece of software, then you can actually in real time have the software adapt into that lens correction effectively. And there is a plugin that's for After Effects and Unreal Engine. So if you're in the virtual production environment, this is incredibly important to be able to have the correct metadata for your production. So very exciting for that. Very cool. And then power, we talked about this, the new batteries there. The only thing that people might be interested in is battery life. So with the new batteries, you do get a little better run time. So you're looking up to roughly 160 minutes of run time on the BPA 60N, and that's in the XFAVC formats. Then up to around 70 minutes on the BPA 30N. And it only varies around five or so minutes when you're recording in the RAW format. So it doesn't affect it massively in that higher formats either. Excellent. Brilliant. And then one of the most probably exciting parts of this is how much camera you get for the value. So XVAT 6499, this is one hell of a camera, dare I say, for what you get here, really. Absolutely. I mean, I think this is a fantastic price for where this sits in the lineup, for the amount of functionality that's packed into this camera. I think this is, and what is on the market from other manufacturers as well, just zooming out from Canon. I think this is a really well-priced camera body. I think, offers a huge amount of value for money. Really, it's very, very powerful. Very, very exciting, and I've already seen a lot of people very excited to get their hands on it and start shooting with it. And roughly, for those wondering, we are looking at shipping September, maybe October, but that's still TBC. But yes, hopefully very soon. Yeah, because every camera that's on the market right now is a very much pre-production one. Yeah, yes, September, October. Exactly. Looking forward to it. That's effectively everything. I mean, here's an overview for those that want to see kind of the key headlines, but there's a lot in this camera. So having that 6K full frame BSI sensor with the latest dual pixel AF, and the key thing for me personally is that 3 base ISO. I think it's just such a winner for those that are shooting in all sorts of environments, especially documentary and that sort of thing where the lights are so varied. That paired with like the 24-105 2.8 is just kind of the perfect combo, really.
Absolutely, and just being able to use lenses like that 24 to 105 and the other RF lenses, which have been on the market for a decent amount of time now and are so fantastic. Being able to use them on a full frame Cinema EOS body is very exciting.
Indeed.
Very, very exciting. Cool. I mean, I've just been flicking through to see if there's any real questions left to answer. I don't think there really are too many. I think Barry's been keeping us keeping himself busy in the chat. So
His
yeah,
fingers will be smoking.
Yes, exactly. It's behind your keyboard.
Yeah.
I think hopefully people have had their answers questioned. We are going to be trying to get some the camera back here shortly to do hands-on events for people to try it themselves over the next couple of months. But yeah, hopefully this session was useful for people and they learn more about the camera. I think this is going to be really interesting to see how much this shakes up the market, because this really offers a lot. It really does. But thank you so much for taking the time out to come and sit down with us and talk it through.
Thank you for having me. Very exciting.
No problem. Okay. Thank you all very much for watching. If you have any questions and you're watching this after the fact, just leave them as a comment and we'll get back to them. And we'll check the comments once it's up live. But thank you very much for watching. I'll see you very soon.